The holidays are upon us, and I can't believe it, but Christmas is just a couple of days away. And if you're anything like me and my family, around this time of year, you might enjoy watching some Christmas movies or some Christmas-themed episodes of some of your favorite TV shows. And so today, we're going to be talking about some of my favorite Christmas-themed episodes from TV shows from the 80s and 90s. So we're just going to jump right into this, and for this one I decided to break it up into two lists. The first one is going to be my top 5 favorite Christmas episodes from 90s TV shows, and then the second list is going to be my top 5 favorite Christmas episodes from 80s TV shows. Alright, so we're going to start things off. These aren't really in order. I mean, kind of somewhat, but I'm not completely married to this order. The first episode on this list comes from this TV show's first season. It's from 1990, and the TV show is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, an episode titled Deck the Halls. So Will is appalled when he finds out that Ashley has never celebrated a real family Christmas, like a grand celebration with all the decorations and, you know, all of that stuff, what he's used to back in Philly living with his mom. And he goes out and he buys every tacky Christmas decoration that you can think of, and he decorates the mansion inside and out. The Bel-Air residents are not having it. They all start calling and complaining, and they come over to complain. There's a couple of guest stars on this episode: Taylor Negron, Evander Holyfield, Ronald Reagan.
Hello, everybody. Hi there, Hillary.
The neighbors realize that maybe the decorations are a good thing, and it's a happy ending. And that's exactly what would happen in Bel-Air. So for the number 4 spot, this is actually a late one. This is from season 9 of this TV show, 1997. We're almost out of the 90s, but this is still an absolute classic episode. It's from Seinfeld, one of the best TV shows of the 1990s, and the episode I'm talking about is The Strike. Kramer goes back to work. We find out that he's actually had a job this entire time, but he's been on strike for the last 12 years. But the strike ends at his former employer, H&H Bagels, and so he goes back to work. But the real highlight of this episode is finding out that George's family doesn't celebrate Christmas, they celebrate Festivus.
What is Festivus?
It's nothing.
We find out the whole story of how George's dad invented Festivus.
No!
His father hated all the commercial and religious aspects of Christmas, so he made up his own holiday.
Then at George's job, he's trying to avoid having to get gifts for his coworkers, so instead he hands out cards with donations that he has supposedly made for all of them to the Human Fund.
Donation has been made in your name to the Human Fund. What is that?
Made it up.
But his boss wants to make a large donation to the Human Fund. He then finds out that it's fake, and he demands that George explain himself. George tries to tell him that his family doesn't celebrate Christmas. His boss demands that he prove it, so George brings him over for Festivus dinner.
Hey! Happy Festivus, everyone!
Kramer is also now infatuated with Festivus, and so it's an amazing episode. If you have not seen it, you gotta watch it. Now, there were 2 TV shows in the 90s that had amazing Halloween episodes and amazing Christmas episodes, and that was Roseanne and Home Improvement. And so for the 3rd slot, I'm giving this one to Home Improvement. They had a lot of Christmas episodes, but I think this one might be one of my favorites. It's from season 3, and it came out in 1993, and it's titled "'Twas the Blight Before Christmas." So Tim is still involved in the neighborhood decorating contest. This is something that he's talked about before in previous episodes, but this is a main focal point of this episode because he's really trying to beat Doc Johnson. And so he's putting up all of these elaborate decorations, but every time he comes up with a new plan for a decoration, right before he puts it up, Doc Johnson puts up something similar, but even better and more extravagant. He has all of these conspiracy theories that Doc Johnson is spying on him. Jill just thinks Tim is crazy, but it turns out that Tim isn't that crazy. Doc Johnson is actually using his granddaughter to flirt with Randy to get information about Tim's Christmas decorations. Now, while all of this is going on, Brad asks if he can go away with his friends on a skiing trip. But when they ask the details, they find out that the ski trip is during Christmas. And they tell him that he can't go because he's got to be there for Christmas. And he tells them, no big deal, he'll just take his gifts with him up to the mountains. They, of course, put their foot down and tell him that he's got to stay home and be with his family. Brad, of course, flips out and, he throws a fit and says that he's not going to church with them on Christmas Eve. They go to church without him. Tim comes home and he catches Brad sneaking out of the house. He was going to hitchhike up to the mountains to go skiing. And you know what? I got to be honest. I never really liked Brad. He was always like my least favorite person on that show. And this right here, this proves that I was right all along. Now, as I just mentioned, there were two shows that had great Halloween and Christmas episodes, Home Improvement and Roseanne. And for the second slot, I'm giving this one to Roseanne, my all-time favorite TV show. And this episode is from season 4. It actually premiered on December 24th, 1991, Christmas Eve, and it's simply titled Santa Claus. So Roseanne finds out that they're trying to hire a last-minute Santa Claus at the mall where she works, and she tries to get Dan to do it because they really need the money, but Dan doesn't want to do it. So Roseanne tries to get the job as Mrs. Claus, but when Leon tells her that Mrs. Claus makes less money than Santa Claus, Roseanne's not having it as she tells Leon that she should play Santa Claus. Leon really doesn't want to hire her, but he has no choice. He has no one else to do it. So he reluctantly gives Roseanne the job as Santa Claus. And they still need a Mrs. Claus, so she gets Leon to hire Jackie.
All right, listen up. This is the procedure.
There's some really great stuff with Roseanne as Santa Claus, some really great interactions with the kids, but the real highlight of this episode is Jackie as Mrs. Claus.
Get away from that camera. You hear me? Get away from that camera!
So for the #1 spot for 90s Christmas episodes, this is going to another one of my favorite shows, and it's from their 3rd season. It came out in 1991, and I'm talking about Saved by the Bell, Home for Christmas. It's Christmas time at Bayside High, and all of the kids decide to get part-time jobs to help out during the holidays. Lisa's working at her mom's hospital, Slater is wrapping gifts at the mall, Kelly's working at a department store at the mall, and well, I guess not all of them got jobs. Zach, as usual, is doing nothing. That is except for, of course, checking out Babes. And he spots a new girl that he's never seen before, and she also works at Moody's department store with Kelly. But that's not the only thing that Zach spots. When he goes to the restroom, he sees a homeless person. And although Zach is familiar with homeless people, he does admit that he hasn't had a lot of experience with them.
I really don't know much about the homeless people. See, in my neighborhood, a poor family is one who doesn't have cable.
Now, this is a 2-part episode, so there's a lot going on. And if you want to find out what Zach's crush and the homeless guy have to do with each other, you're just gonna have to watch the episode. All right, so that brings us to my top 5 Christmas episodes of the 80s. And I'm gonna kick this list off with a classic. I'm sure most of you are gonna remember this one. It's from the 4th season of this television show, and it came out in 1989, and it's titled, It's a Bundyful Christmas, Part 2. Of course, I'm talking about Married with Children, and you could probably tell from the title that this is a take on It's a Wonderful Life. So after Al gets electrocuted by the Christmas lights, he's awakened by an angel who's played by Sam Kinison. And I remember this was a really big deal. They kept showing the commercials over and over again that Sam Kinison was going to be in this episode, and everybody was really excited. I know at least in my house, we were all excited about it. And so Sam Kinison wakes him up, and he then finds out that he's actually there to help Al.
I'm Al Bundy.
Now, unlike in the original story, when he shows him what life would be like if he didn't exist, it turns out that Al's family is actually a lot better off without him, and this makes him want to live.
After all the grief they put me through, I want to live.
Now, for the #4 spot, this is one that had to be on this list because not only is it a Christmas classic, but it's also the very first episode of this show, and no one had any idea that it was going to kickstart something that would still be going on today. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the longest running animated show ever. And so I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. The Simpsons. And I'm sure most of you already know that before this, The Simpsons was just a short on the Tracey Ullman Show. And I used to actually watch the Tracey Ullman Show just for The Simpsons short. And so I was really excited when I found out that they were going to have a Christmas special. And I was even more excited when I found out that it was going to become a series. And again, I don't think anybody had any idea that it would still be going on in 2024. Now, on those first couple of seasons of The Simpsons, the animation is a little crude and some of the voices aren't exactly what we're used to these days, but there's still some really funny episodes on those early seasons, and the very first episode is no different. It is an absolute classic and still holds up to this day. Now, everybody remembers the TV show What's Happening. Great show, hilarious show, and one of the best TV theme songs of all time. But that's not the show that's on this list. The show that I'm talking about is What's Happening Now, which is the follow-up to What's Happening. It was on the air from 1985 to 1988, and it follows the same cast of characters that are now a little bit older. Raj now has a wife, and he owns the diner where they used to hang out at. Now, the episode that I wanted to talk about came out in 1987, and it's titled I'll Be Homeless for Christmas. As I mentioned, Raj now owns the diner, and he's annoyed because there's a homeless man who just keeps hanging out at his diner, sitting at the counter drinking coffee. And so he starts harassing him, and Shirley tells him to just chill out, but Raj doesn't listen, and he tells the homeless man,
"Sorry, but you're gonna have to go home."
What kind of home do you think he has?
This is where it gets kind of funny, and I know it's not supposed to be funny. When he tells the homeless man, "Why don't you go home?" he explains to Raj that he lives in a refrigerator box. And for some reason, Raj acts like he has never heard of homelessness.
You live in a box?
All right, first of all, it's not like Raj grew up in Bel Air or something like that. And he's got to be, I'm going to guess, like in his mid-20s. And by 1987, it's not like homelessness was a new concept or anything. So after he kicks the man out of his diner, he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, Raj is now homeless. And he then goes home to see his wife, and you're never gonna believe this, but she has no idea who he is. And it turns out that he has switched places with the homeless man. And I know, it's not a very unique story, but it's done well, and it's funny, and it's a great episode. So one of my favorite TV shows when I was growing up was Diff'rent Strokes, which technically is a 70s show, but it went into the mid-80s, and I will always consider it an 80s show. And this particular episode is from 1982, and it's titled Santa's Helper. So Arnold is bummed out because he wants to get a great gift for Mr. D, but he doesn't have any money, even though Mr. D is a millionaire, but he doesn't want to spoil the kids. Even though they live in a penthouse and they go everywhere in a chauffeur-driven limousine and they have a maid that does everything for him. But other than that, so Arnold is kind of bummed, and he's walking down the street when he runs into a shady sidewalk Santa who's played by Garrett Morris, who's hilarious in this episode. And Santa is telling Arnold to cheer up.
Cheer up, kid. Things will get better. Hey, you from Harlem?
No, Park Avenue.
Things just got better.
And Arnold starts telling Santa about his problems. And when Santa finds out that Arnold lives in a penthouse on Park Avenue,
Your dad has a corporation, and you live on Park Avenue?
he starts getting some ideas in his head. And he starts off by hiring Arnold as his helper, and later Arnold brings him home, at which point Santa puts some tape on the door so he can later sneak back into the house, at which point he steals their tree and all of their gifts and their stereo and their silverware, and now they have nothing except for millions of dollars. Now, of course, this episode teaches us that Christmas is not about having lots of gifts, it's about being with the people you love and having lots of money. Now, for the #1 spot for my favorite Christmas episodes of the 1980s, this is one that some of you may be surprised by. Well, if you've watched my videos, you probably won't be surprised by this. I think some of you will definitely disagree with this one. Now, I have talked many times about how much I love Paul Reubens and Pee Wee Herman, and how I grew up watching Pee Wee's Playhouse, and that's why I'm giving the #1 spot to the 1988 Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special. In my opinion, this is one of the best Christmas special / Christmas episodes ever made. So the episode starts out with Pee-wee making his very lengthy Christmas list, and then by the end of the episode, Santa comes to the playhouse and Pee-wee finds out that Santa is not going to be able to deliver toys to anyone else in the world because the sleigh is full of all of Pee-wee's stuff.
I'm awfully sorry to hear that, Santa. Please let me know how it all turns out.
The Christmas episode features the regular cast coming by the playhouse to wish Pee-wee a Merry Christmas, but it also has a large list of cameos. And I get it, these aren't really cameos that kids had any interest in seeing. It's still a really great list, and we're talking everyone from Oprah Winfrey, Dinah Shore, Grace Jones, Katie Lang, Whoopi Goldberg, Magic Johnson, the Del Rubio triplets, Cher, Joan Rivers, and my personal favorite, Little Richard.
Hi, Pee-wee!
And it really is a great episode. If you've never seen it, you should give it a try, especially if you're a Pee-wee fan. I know for me, it's a must every Christmas time. That is going to do it for this video. If there were some episodes on this list that you've never seen, please give them a try this year. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.